Gosh, what a relief, right? What a relief to know that we can let go of the goal and the outcome and focus on the pleasure and the connection.
Yeah.
And that discrepancy and desire is natural, normal.
Yeah. Every couple.
You did a beautiful job on that.
Normalizing that.
Good.
Rex, you probably have all kinds of questions.
I got a lot of questions here.
all I see is a blank piece of paper, but
front and back here.
Okay.
No. So, I took a lot of notes just because a lot of things you were saying were really resonating with me. So I'll try to get through. I really have a couple questions, not too many. But I did want to say, you started off by saying that you heard that sex therapy early, I think, in your education is really grief and loss counseling. And could you expand on that a little bit? Because that really interested me. That just sounds like you were saying, like, yeah, a lot of it is people are hurting and they don't know how to handle it and to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would describe my work in exactly the same way, that I would make that same statement that the sex therapist made. But what really resonated for me around that is the loss that people feel, the deep pain if they want to be sexually intimate with their partner and they don't have that. I should say, any two people that both don't want sex, not a problem. Like, there's no amount of sex we need to have. It's really about if both people are happy. But if somebody isn't, if they're longing for that connection and don't have it, that is really deep pain, and that's sort of what hit me in that moment, was like, holy cow, this really matters.
Is there, with that said, is it more, I would imagine that the men are generally the more higher desire and the women are the lower desire. Is that true?
Not exactly. I mean, okay. I know that is the stereotype, and certainly that can exist. But in my practice, where, I only work with couples, and now these are people coming to sex therapy specifically for trouble, right? But maybe half the women are the higher desire person. And we're talking heterosexual relationships, because it also exists in same-sex relationships. Somebody's higher, somebody's lower. But sometimes it's the woman who's the higher desire person. And I actually think that adds yet another layer of distress, because culturally we think men should just want it and be ready to go. And so the guy might feel extra bad about that, and the woman might feel extra like, am I not desirable enough or something? Like, it adds even more angst, I think.
Yeah, I could easily understand that, just in how our culture is set up in that way.
Right.
That's fascinating. A question I have, scheduling sex. Is that something that works or doesn't work?
I am so glad you asked me that. This is one of my little hot buttons because often people have tried that. And now, if that fixes it for you, that was just a matter of priority. That was just we're so busy, we have to carve out some time. But for people that are really struggling in these traps, it just increases the pressure. And it's so goal-oriented. We are scheduling sex.
Yes.
How do we know that we're going to want sex next Tuesday at 8? Like, we can't, we can't know that. So what you do is schedule opportunities to be physical. Schedule trips to the playground without any preconception or commitment to what's going to happen then. So you create these opportunities on purpose, but within those, there's no pressure.
Okay, that's interesting. Because, there might be spaghetti on the wall at Tuesday at 8 o'clock, and that's got to get cleaned off before you can.
And reactive desire, somebody cannot know ahead of time if they're going to end up in the mood. So we cannot, if you're just going to schedule, like, we're having sex Tuesday at 8, no matter what, that becomes sex out of obligation. And the person who's not feeling desire is going to start to avoid, just first of all, start to dread it, and then start to avoid it.
So then instead, Jessa, we are scheduling pleasure and connection. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you're scheduling the placeholder, the container in which you focus on pleasure and connection. So making a date, like you plan vacations, you plan dates, you plan things that are important to you. So block out the time. But once you're there, let go of any expectation or pressure or goal about what's going to happen.
Nice.
What you just said kind of popped an idea in my head, but like, you have the lower desire person or the more reactive desire person isn't ready during the scheduled time. It's just going to start feeling like, oh my gosh, there's this test coming up. Mm-hmm. You're just dreading having to take because you don't feel like you're ready for it.
Right.
And I can emotionally, what's the word for? I can identify with that emotionally, having that dread of, I don't want to do this thing. And I think that's harder for the higher desire partner. I would imagine to even empathize with.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my work is The higher desire person, 99.9% of the time, in my experience, wants their partner to want sex, not to just have sex. And so when I can tap into that and get them less focused on, is this happening, or what's the frequency is happening, or whatever, which is can be how they come in, and think, wait, what I really want is for my partner to want this. And when they understand how reactive desire works and how much joy two people can feel if they aren't so attached to an outcome, they usually do embrace this. I mean, it takes a little bit of a shift because they're used to wanting what they want potentially, but
wow, that's profound. And I think that's really what higher desire people have to understand and learn.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's definitely uncommon knowledge and understanding. Wow. Do you have any theories why there are differences in desire?
You mean differences between two people?
Yeah.
Well, because everybody's different. I mean, if you think about it, why would any two people want exactly the same amount of sex or the exact same kind or at the exact same time? I mean, of course there are differences.
I would just imagine that everybody wants ice cream. So
but not necessarily.
But do they want the same flavor? They want the same serving. I mean, I happen to love ice cream, so it's hard to imagine. But other people are lactose intolerant, So it's if we're going to have two people, we can each have our ice cream or not have it or not. But sex is a shared experience. So you've got. I really believe this. You've got to be looking for a way. This is a win-win. I mean, the whole key to this, everything I talk about is how do you make this fun and easy for both people. I am never trying to get a lower desire person to have sex. I'm trying to help them want as much sex as they can want. And that involves an awful lot of change on the higher desire persons.
From these two different places, you're not really trying to get them in the middle, are you? High desire to become lower and low desire to become higher.
Right. It's not a math problem. Like we're averaging things or we're averaging the frequency we want. It's like, how do we shake up this entire paradigm so the whole thing does feel like a playground?
Wow. That's really cool. I like that. Have you ever seen a couple where one was low desire, the other was high desire, and then the low desire became high desire, or vice versa? I think you mentioned earlier, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think if I've seen them make that switch like right in our work together. I certainly have had people come in one arrangement and they used to be the other. But sometimes if the lower desire person, for instance, had pain or had some sort of expectations on themselves, that once we shifted that, it really unlocks their interest. Like this was such a huge barrier, because we're sort of looking at what's going to open up access to desire, and then what obstacles are in the way that we're trying to move out of the way. And it's a combination of those things. It's what Emily Nagoski talks about, brakes and accelerators. It's like we gotta pay attention to both.
Is there anything common that does that, or
that blocks desire?
Yeah.
I mean, yes. I mean, a lot of it is this thinking around desire discrepancy or just our conception of sex, that it is all or nothing and it needs to go a certain way. I mean, our expectations about it are so off base in the first place. And that creates all these feelings of inadequacy or something's wrong and all this fear, right?
Well, you mentioned a lot of it's shaped by our perceptions, which is usually fed by media, movies, and books, and 50 Shades of this or that.
I missed that book. Yeah.
Maybe there's a new book title for you.
Right. 50 Shades of this or that. Yeah.
Do you have tips, maybe one or two tips just for maybe a low desire and a high desire person and their interaction to maybe improve their interaction?
Well, embrace this idea of the playground and be willing to start with like a blank slate. Don't go in like, hey, this is what needs to happen, or this is what we've always done. Trying to communicate about that, go in and just play. Like what would it be like to just think about what you want and stay there, instead of thinking ahead. I certainly go see a sex therapist if this turns out to be really difficult. Like if you're really running into trouble, or it's really hard to talk about, or it's just raising more issues or something like that, get some support.
Okay. And you said Intimacy with Ease, correct? That's the series?
Yeah.
And is that found on the internet or podcast?
Yeah, intimacywithease.com is my website.
Okay.
And so that's where people can sign up for the webinar, sign up for the secret podcast, or find my podcast that's been on a 2-year break at the moment, but there's more than 200 episodes up there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm impressed. This is definitely a topic I think resonates with a lot of people, and I feel very enlightened. So thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all this knowledge.
So, yeah, you're welcome.
I look forward to digging into some of this stuff. So
yeah, thank you so much, Jess. This has just been this has been awesome. Yeah, all kinds of great tips.
I think the site is great. So beautiful. Thank you for wherever you are, whether it's in Seattle, New Mexico, wherever you go. You're making a difference in this big world.
Yeah. Thanks for what you're doing.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a few minutes to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. When you hit the like button and leave a comment, your feedback helps us improve the show. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and connect with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and on Facebook at Stronger Marriage. Be sure to share with us what topics you want us to explore or what you loved about today's episode. If you want even more resources to improve your relationship connection, visit our website at strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producers Rex Polanis and Alexis Alcott and the team at Utah State University. And you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission